Welcome to episode 426 of Coin Concede, a Hearthstone podcast dedicated to making the competitive side of the game more accessible to you. It is Thursday, December 21st, 2023, in the evening. Coming to you from Teldrassil, California, it's me, Megasa. From Northrend, Massachusetts, we have Wicked Good.
Hi.
As you can see, we are missing Edelweiss today. Unfortunately, she is sick this week. We wish her a speedy recovery, and so it will just be the two of us today. But from all around the world, we do have you, dear listeners. And as always, we want to thank you for your kind reviews. It is always a great way to help people find the show, especially if you cannot support us monetarily, and just spreading the word. We really, really appreciate that in any way that you can. All right. So it's fun to do the intro for the first time. But how was your life on ladder this week, Ben Wicked?
Well, I had before the patch dropped, I was basically just playing Dragon Druid because I got tired of losing to nonsense. And I had done some damage to my rank by trying silly things. I think I played too much Sludge Warlock and ended up dirtying up my rank. So I
got mired in the sludge, as it were.
Yeah, I got stuck in the mud and I needed to dragon my way out of it. So I did that for a bit and got myself up to, I don't know, like 3K or whatever. And then I posted a little rant about Elise on Twitter after the balance patches, and then got baited by one of my co-hosts, who shall remain nameless, who is not Edelweiss. So to try a variety of different Highlander priests, and I've basically just been playing Highlander priests. So we kind of came up with the thesis that I tried one of Nohan's earlier experiments, and that wasn't working. And I posted a really long Twitter rant about why I didn't feel like it was working. That I don't necessarily regret it a day later, but the list improved since then. But then you suggested, well, why don't we just try putting in all the undead? So I put in all the undead, and I ended up with like just 3 spells, and so I put in Magatha, and you run just like every undead I could find, because a lot of them have good death rattles or they have decent synergy. I did have a couple games where I won by summoning an invincible and then having the death rattle give me the extra 5 damage that I needed for lethal. That was fun, but it felt like it just didn't feel like it felt like I was getting there. I was only playing it in casual because I wasn't brave enough to play that on ladder, and I could definitely, it's been a while since I've played in casual, and I could definitely tell the difference in play quality. Like, they match you around someone at your MMR, but the people who I were playing against were clearly not paying attention, which is fine. It's casual. But I could tell that I was getting away with things that there was no way I was going to get away with on ladder. Like, just like clear misplays that I could see from a mile away. Like, sometimes, like, when I'm streaming, I'll be like, well, why the hell did they do that? And then I find out, like, 5 minutes later why they did that, and I'm like, okay, that makes sense. These were not that. These were just like draw last types of misplays. But Nohan's kept working on that list for the last 2 days, and he posted a Highlander priest that he had good results with that this morning, as we're recording on Thursday, so this morning. And the deck feels real. I'm like 2-2 with it. One of the games, I mean, I haven't had that much time to play because I had like 3 games at lunch, and I probably shouldn't have started the third one, but it turned out okay. I went to lunch a little bit early because the office was kind of empty this morning, and I wanted to get to the pizza place before they gave away my table. But
and you wanted to get in at least one game of Highlander priest.
I mean, the games weren't actually that long. They went relatively quickly. Even like one of them that was against a Renathal control priest with duplicates didn't take as long as I thought it might. I started that one at 12:30. I'm like, oh, I'm gonna have to play this while walking back, aren't I? But I was able to finish it in like 15 minutes, which is short for a priest mirror. But it basically, it just does the thing that you kind of expect you have to do with with Elise, which is just, it just runs high impact minions that'll affect the board for the most part. There are exceptions. You kind of have to run ETC in a Highlander deck just to cover your duplicates. Um, but and there, so there's a couple of, I think there's like one or two other minions that are just kind of vanilla 5/5s, but it's okay to get like one or two vanilla 5/5s, but you really want to hit like Yogg and Aman'Thul and Blackwater Behemoth. It runs Raden now that Raden has taunt, and you still usually get like one or two out of it. It's running Plague Spreader, which is hilarious, especially because the Plague Spreaders that you get back come back out of Raden. And so that's how you can deal with like Sif or whatchamacallit, or like Azurite Scorpions that are getting bounced, or Drillies that are getting bounced back without having to run Dirty Rat, because Dirty Rat's just bad and you don't.
Yeah, and you don't want Dirty Rat out of Elise, and I've been seeing more Odin Warrior as well. We'll talk a lot more about the meta and explanations, but
yeah. So, and it worked. Oh, and Ziliax, because Ziliax, when you get it out of Elise, is a 5/5 Rush Divine Shield lifesteal. So that's just heals you and removes something, which is pretty good. That was something I was trying when I was playing around with them. Like that seems like it would make sense, but I couldn't figure out how to work it in. But it feels like a real deck. You have all the removal, like you kind of, you don't tempo like you would with like a Reno Shaman, but it also feels like it's enough of a control deck to kind of get there. And the other buffs to Priest helped, and we'll talk a lot more about all the changes in Priest and the rest of the meta when we get to explanations. But other than that, I've still been working my way through Trails in the Sky SC. I'm like I just finished chapter 4. My daughter is through that game and several chapters into the next one, because she's 14 and I'm not. so yeah, that's but it's fine, because I'm like 2 other games ahead of her, so she'll slow down when she gets to Trails of Cold Steel, and then I'll be able to catch up there. And the Steam sale started today. I'm probably buying Baldur's Gate 3. I don't know when I'm going to play it. And both because I have 16,000 Trails games to play, but also because someone in my family is going to be using my Steam library always. so because I was telling my oldest daughter about it, that it was on sale, because she's a big D&D nerd, and she's like, oh yeah, I've wanted that. And then she said, oh crap, Twin B is playing Trails for the rest of our lives and is using your Steam library, so I don't know when I'm going to play it. I'm like, well, maybe we figure something out. Maybe we don't. I don't know. I got the same problem. So I could at least play on the Steam Deck, but I don't know how well that works. So we'll see. But yeah,
I have a friend who's been playing it on the Steam Deck successfully. So it is possible. And if you need builds for this game because you don't want to deal with all of it, you have 2 co-hosts who are happy to
trust me. I'm not figuring this crap out on my own. I have enough to deal with, and like I know where to go for Diablo builds. I'm not even trying to figure it out. I will ask for help immediately when we get there. But yeah, we'll see how that goes. I'm less worried about it playing well on the Steam Deck than about the structural integrity of my neck and shoulders from playing it that way for that long. That's more my concern, and also my eyesight, given that I am now an old man. But whatever, we'll figure something out. I think I can. I guess what I need to figure out is if I can put my computer in offline mode and still allow them to use my library. If I do that, I'm like back to when we bought the second or third Switch and figuring out all the logistics between all these different systems and games that we own. And it's like, this is not the kind of thing that I thought I was going to have to deal with when I was saying, as a young, naive parent to be, oh, I can't wait to play games with my kids. Like, I was not thinking about having to manage digital ownership across 3 systems on the same platform.
There is always something. But honestly, one thing also that I actually got an external SSD because I needed one anyway, but Baldur's Gate is so huge and the saves are so huge that I'm just going to spare my computer. So I've been when I'm playing it, I have they make cute little ones now that are not very expensive, but it's dedication. Uh, I have been playing quite a bit of Hearthstone, given that I'm not out of the classes don't end for the semester for me until tomorrow. So there's been a lot of frantic final projects, final exams, stuff like that going on for my students. But I've still had time. I was playing a lot of Paladin before the patch. Making everyone who I faced be like, oh, another Paladin. I was actually seeing not as many opposing Paladins as one would expect given the win rate of that deck. I was working my way up into top 1K, playing in top 1K for a while. And on the one hand, I felt a bit bad to just be taking advantage of Paladin, but I've been on the record of being a person playing a lot of Paladin even before this happened, so I figured it was fair for me to take advantage. And the deck was clicking well with me. So I played that, and I knew I was going to get a cushion in 11x that I would ruin immediately upon the patch coming out.
Of course.
I probably
I mean,
would've
that's
stayed
just
where
the way that's just the way it works, right? Like,
That's exactly how it works. If I had kept playing Paladin, I probably would be fine. But of course, I tried everything. The most successful of which was actually Drum Druid. I went into the Drum Druid Deck Lab forum thread in the Discord server and was asking World 8 and Minmon what the current list was and for advice on it. And they've got both a dragon drum list and a sort of greedy partner drum list, although there's some discussion of putting greedy partner in the dragon list instead of Seedsman. Seedsman being the 4 mana ramp card, because that's kind of expensive and awkward. And a greedy partner gives you a coin, kind of does the same thing for 2 mana, because you just want the extra mana on that one turn when you're playing drum, really. So it felt pretty good. And I played a bunch of other stuff. I played some Naga Priest. I felt very against brand that I was having a little trouble with it. I don't think it's the deck's fault. I think it might be kind of an interference effect where my patterns from older Naga Priests are making me play worse in this deck because it is not the same deck.
yeah, it's more of a board deck that you're just trying to like go wide, and it's weird because you're trying to go wide rather than tall. And I thought about trying it, and then I just like could not wrap my brain around it, and figured I'm just gonna wait until somebody who knows what they're doing is playing it, and I can watch them play it or go back and watch like Worlds or something to try to figure it out, because it's very different. Like, I know how to play old Naga Priest, and all I know is I cannot play new Naga Priest like old Naga Priest.
Yes, I will let you know when I figure it out a little bit better. I was definitely, I think, watching the World's players, even though it's a slightly different meta, the way that they pilot it is really instructive. So unfortunately, I didn't get to see as many of those games during Worlds as I would have liked. But I was missing any sort of AoE. Like, there is like no AoE. There is the Hauler overheal card, but it's not really an overheal deck. You don't want to, and that damages itself for 4. So you have to heal it up for 4 before you can, and so then you need like flash heals, and then you're not playing the same deck. So
Right.
I tried that briefly, and I was like, no, this is not it. You just have to get by without AoEs, I think. So that was a bit difficult, but I tried various forms of Sludge Warlock. I tried Edel's Imp Sludge Warlock. Did okay. I tried just now a just sort of straight Sludge Warlock that Hat recommended that I should try before going on this episode, and did. I have a 100% win rate over 1 game with it, so clearly that's the winner.
So that now you just have to retire it. That's it. Just retire it and
100% win
move on.
rate Sludge Warlock.
Yeah.
Done. Yeah, I tried a million other things that I'll probably be able to remember better when we get to the meta explanation. I did not play very much Highlander Priest. I did play like a couple games of it in casual, but my real evil plan was to get you to play it for me.
Yeah, I mean, that's fair. I mean, it really doesn't take much to beat me. I am nothing if not predictable. I'm going to play priest decks and complain about Shadow Step. That's going to be what I'm going to do, and you don't really need too much poking to get me to do it. So
I knew I could do it, even with, I'm not I think there might be something with the undead minions, but certainly what No Hands has seems promising and is where I would go next. And if there's something with the undead, maybe it's fewer undead and more spells, but I don't. It definitely, Highlander Priest is not super easy to build, but I would never have come up with the list that No Hands has, but I'm intrigued by it. I watched a little bit of his stream, and it looked like it was working out pretty well for him once he'd done some refining. So, I mean, this is the kind of thing, if you just look at HSR, you're gonna see it looking terrible. But sometimes unrefined decks, or decks where they're having a lot of trouble doing, being able to recognize what archetype it is, you're going to see misleading statistics sometimes on the data sites.
Well, it also took a couple days to come together, right? So like he put in most of the games on it, or you have people just trying stuff, and a lot of those were failed experiments. Like he posted the list this morning. I wouldn't expect you, like, if you're just looking at, like, it's not going to show up in the meta tab for a full day until people have started really playing it. It's going to take a little while to catch up, to pick up on it. And even then, right, if you're looking at the Dex tab, that's 3 days. So if you're looking at it today, it's going to take a couple, you're going to see all the failed experiments, even if you're filtering to 3 days, for a couple days until like that becomes the primary list. I guess well, that's the list, right? Like, so when you're looking at the Dex tab, that'll probably be there, but it also takes a little while to figure out how to play it. Like, there are things that are a little bit non-intuitive about it. Like, he's got Tramheist in there primarily to respond to a Reno turn, which I wouldn't have thought about without hearing that, because Tramheist is one of those cards that I would just want to cut. And you kind of can't if you're playing Raden, because you just don't have that many ways to get minions to play minions that didn't start in your deck without getting a little bit more thief stuff. I was trying what was it, the 4-cost dragon that gives you a card from your opponent's deck when it dies. So psychic detective coming through. I forget what the name of the card is. Because that's taunt at least, and then that gives you something when it dies. But the other problem with going too hard into thief stuff is just you don't have hand space because you're not tempoing minions. So like a lot of your cards are reactive, and even the ones that aren't, like, give you other cards. Like, you can heal with the heal bottle one, but then you have the bottle. You can play Swarm of Light Bugs, but then you have the bottle with the light bugs in it, right? Like, you can identity theft, but then you're putting 2 cards in your hand. Creation Protocol's putting 2 cards in your hand. So like a lot of the stuff that you're going to play early is adding to your hand, and you don't really have a lot of room. Like, I did play a Tramheist against Reno Paladin, not to get Reno, but to get Ignis, but Ignis was the 3rd card, and I thought they'd only play 2, and I didn't make enough room in my hand to be able to get the Ignis. Because I got like a Nerubian Vizier and a Prismatic Beam, which is not nothing, but not exactly not what I was trying to do. Because I needed like 1 damage to get through, like the last bit of damage, and I never got it. And if I'd gotten that Ignis, if I had it miscalculated and gotten that Ignis, I could have just gotten like the 1 mana Wind Fury weapon and gotten there probably. But like, that's the thing, is that the hand space just becomes an issue. So you can't really go too hard in the thief stuff, because like you just burn the cards that you wanted to put in your deck. So
no, that all makes a lot of sense. And yeah, that was something when I tuned into his stream, he was just doing a Tramheist after Reno, and I'm like, oh, okay. That's what the Tramheist is really there for. It makes sense. You know, even though you can't Reno the same turn that you play the Tramheist, that's fine.
It's another Reno, who cares? It's fine if you can't play it that turn. Yeah. But this is also like, when you have like a weird deck like this, the person who's playing it is going to have a much higher win rate than everyone else, because they know why the cards are in the deck, right? And like somebody else who's just picking this up, especially if they're just like, if they're watching his stream, they'll know what they're supposed to do. If they're just picking it up from the tweet, they're not going to get the nuances of some of the card choices and like why they're there until they've lost with the deck a bunch. So that's something to keep in mind when you're picking up a deck like this, or when you're looking at the stats of a deck like this, is that a lot of the people who are playing it are going to have like a built-in learning curve to in order to get their win rate up to that point. And they're also probably not facing what No Hands is facing in top 100. They're probably facing a lot of stupid stuff that he's not really facing, other than he's farming rogues. You'll see a lot of rogue, but you're not going to see like as much of the refined rogues that you're going to see in top 100, and you're not going to see a lot of the other more refined decks that it can target, you're going to see a bunch of people trying random things that just got buffed to see if they work, and that may not necessarily work out when you're playing a control deck that is looking to target specific things, even a Highlander deck.
Yeah. All right. Well, we're going to have a lot more meta talk going on in Dexplanations, but we need to save some for that section. So
and we've got a surprising amount of non-balance change news to talk about. So we should start talking about that.
Gadgets and Gazette always gets the scoop.
So it's been a relatively busy week, all things considered, especially given that the dev team is going out on vacation. Generally, they close the office for the last week of the year. So there's been a fair amount of activity. One thing that we did get across a number of different social platforms this week are polls for inclusions into the core set. So those of you who remember the great zero drop election from last year that got us what did we end up with Murloc Tinyfin? Is that what we got out of that last year? Because Snowflipper Penguin was already there, right? Or is
no,
Snowflipper
that's why
Penguin?
We have Penguin.
Oh, so Penguin was running for re-election. Yeah. So Penguin was running for re-election. So we got we got 4 polls, 2 on Twitter, 1 on Reddit, 1 on Discord, on the Hearthstone Discord. So we had a re-election for Zero Drop, and Snowflipper Penguin did win re-election. So hopefully he will be benevolent in his second term in power. We got a poll for neutral taunt, and that was Stonehill Defender is the one that won that one. That's Get Out of My Jungle from Ungoro that discovers another taunt. I believe there was it was Treasure Guard and Circus Amalgam, and I forget what the fourth one was. That was part of that, but I mean,
Undead 2/5 with Reborn that no one remembers.
Oh yeah. So, yeah. But a taunt that discovers a taunt is something that we're gonna see, and that'll probably be good for Warrior eventually.
Plus, it has the nostalgia factor. I feel like people were voting for flavor as much as anything. Like Penguin instead of Tinyfin, that's just kind of a flavor vote. It's a Penguin.
Yeah, that's fair too. So that was that, and then the third one that was taking place on Reddit, or was this one on Reddit and that one was in the Discord? I forget which one was. No, the neutral taunt was on Reddit. The one that was on Discord was for an iconic vanilla minion, and that one was Boulder Fist Ogre, I believe was the winner of that. So, I mean, of course. I mean, it's good. It's just good stats for the cost, I mean, what else are you can do? So the last one that's going on Twitter right now as we speak is for which evasive minion we want to add back into core, and the nominees are Evasive Feywing, which is a 4-mana 5/4, can't be targeted. Dragon, Evasive Chimera, which is a 2-mana 2/1 beast with poisonous and can't be targeted. Evasive Worm, which is a 6-mana 5/3 dragon with Divine Shield Rush and can't be targeted. Or Robes of Protection, which is a 3-mana 2/4 that says your minions can't be targeted by spells or hero powers. So that is happening on Twitter right now. I'm actually going to vote myself to see what it is. Evasive Worm is currently in the lead, 44%. Robes of Protection at 34% with 21 hours left to go. There's still... we're not ready to stop the count quite yet, but that's something that if you want to go do that and you're listening to us live, go vote. Otherwise, we'll see what the results are. You'll probably know them by the time you're listening to this. But it's cool that they're giving a little bit. I mean, ultimately, these are pretty inconsequential for the most part. I mean, outside of maybe Arena. But it's cool to give people a little bit of a voice in some of these things where it's... which one of these gets in is not going to really change the meta all that much, but it's still kind of a cool way to participate.
Yeah, I think they're picking ones where it's not going to make that much difference. They have certain categories, I'm sure, of types of core cards they want that they already do, and they probably kind of already were just asking around which one do you think. So it is kind of fun to have this be a more democratic process. Obviously, I wouldn't want very many consequential decisions to be made
Yes.
this way. We don't want the Bodie McBoatface style. That is what we would get. That kind of thing.
That
if we had
that would probably be
consequential.
McBanterface's World's Championship card if he won Worlds. Would be something like that, I guess.
Oh,
Bodie
yes.
McBanterface.
Absolutely, that would be a great card. So I think for something where it doesn't matter that much, it's fun to have that, and it allows
Yeah.
people to feel like they have a voice. And
Yeah.
so if you are listening live and you haven't voted yet, go vote on the last one.
Yep. There was also a pretty cool there's a pretty cool profile of Korra and Jira and their journey from esports casters to game development, just kind of profiling them. Talks about the infamous WSOE tournament that they were both part of along with Edelweiss back in, I think that was 2017, I think, or 2016, I forget. I think it was 2017. But talking about like that, their experience competing, what that brings to their development journey, and like what, how they got from just getting into casting, getting to playing, getting into casting, and then getting into the dev team, and what they're bringing to the dev team. It's a really cool read. It's cool of them to feature them like that. So just go and check that out. It's a more in-depth profile than Shacknews typically. Well, I don't know. I don't read Shacknews a lot, but it kept going. I was expecting it to be shorter because a lot of the pieces on those types of sites tend to be shorter, but this one went on for quite a while, so it was good to see. If you have Amazon Prime, oh sorry, go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, I was just gonna say this is a really fun article to read, and something that I think a lot of people don't know. Edel in chat is saying that the competition was in 2018.
2018. Well, was that recent? Huh. Okay.
Anything pre-COVID is.
Yeah, I know. It all just kind of runs together. Yeah.
But they've both had a really amazing journey, and also just really, really nice people.
Yeah. Yeah.
Really
yeah. We got to have dinner
really
with. Nice. We got to have dinner with Gia at BlizzCon, and she's a delight, and obviously Korra is amazing as well. So it's cool to see them get that kind of profile on a site and get to tell their story. It's very cool to see.
Edel says 2018 is 5 years ago, man.
God, stop.
If I think about what was happening in my life in 2018, I go, yeah, that actually was a while ago.
Yeah, it sure was. Yeah, okay. I had started streaming in 2018. Oh no, was it 2017 or 2018? I forget which year. I think it was 20. Yeah, it was 2018 that I started. That was the year I started streaming because I just ended the other podcast, and that when I had the time to start streaming. So I've been streaming for 5 years too, which is bananas. Time, what's it good for? Absolutely nothing. Anyway, if you have Amazon Prime, there are 3 free standard packs waiting for you at Prime Gaming, so go pick those up and either use those now or instead of buying the mini set, if you've collected enough of them, or save them for the next expansion, whatever you want to do with them, but free packs are free packs. There was a period of time after the patch that Barrel of Sludge was not triggering when you discarded or destroyed it, and they got in a hot fix very, very quickly, and that is fixed. So if you tried to play Sludge Warlock in that sliver of time and it was not behaving for you, it's been fixed. You can go ahead and slab your opponents again. So just be aware of that. There was an update on the bot bans. They've been giving us these periodic updates on what they're doing to combat the bots, which are mostly an issue in Wild and Arena at the moment. They used to be in Classic until they closed Classic, and then they had to go somewhere. Especially since I guess they can't idle in Mercenaries anymore either, so now they're in Wild and Arena. But so they say as the year winds down, I want to give you another update on our increased actions against unauthorized bots this year. And they, as a reminder, they're specifying unauthorized bots because there are some Blizzard supplied bots that play at low MMR in order to fill in matchmaking. So these are not those. These are ones that are gold farming generally, or XP farming. So since our last update in October, we banned an additional 114,237 accounts for botting. We've now banned over 284,000 total accounts for botting throughout the year. As you can see from those numbers, we've been ramping up our efforts throughout the year. We'll continue to fight this into the new year and have some plans for next year that we think will address the problem at a more systemic level. As a reminder, you can continue to help by reporting suspected bots using the in-game reporting tool. So I'm just doing some mental math here. That's like 30 to 40% of what they banned across the entire year just in the last 2 months, which is pretty incredible. So they're definitely they're getting more sophisticated in banning them. They're not going to tell us what they're doing because then any information that you give to the people who are building the bots just lets them figure out how to get around it. But it's clear that they're figuring something out and they're getting a lot more sophisticated with it. But also, let's go over the problem is, good Lord, that's a lot of accounts.
That is a lot of accounts. It really makes you, I think people playing at the MMRs that we're playing at don't see it as much, but it does show the scale of the problem.
Apparently,
they're addressing it more.
Apparently in Wild, there was like a bot that got to rank 1 legend, I heard. I don't know. Like, even Shaman is apparently very broken in Wild, and that's just what they play. And they were able to climb like into Legend and climb within Legend with a bot. So even in Wild, they're actually legitimately an issue. So, but yeah, in Standard you don't see them at those ranks, but in Wild, apparently even at high MMR, it's a problem. So there also was a tweet from the Blizzard Twitter account talking about Blizzard by the numbers, which had a bunch of interesting stats in there about, how many characters were created in Azeroth and Sanctuary. Again, Diablo 4 launched this year. They had, so a trillion monsters killed in Sanctuary. Not sure if that's just Diablo 4 or across all 3 games. Doesn't really matter. The stat for Hearthstone that we had, 15.8 billion with a B packs opened this year. That is an incredible amount of packs. I mean, granted, a lot of them are bought with gold, but still, I mean, if you think about like how many packs you open on even like one of our like whale adjacent accounts, right? Like we probably open, I don't know, 400, 500 packs per expansion, so maybe like 1,500 total, and that's probably a high estimate. And
that's a high estimate, I think. Yeah.
So that's a lot of packs to be open, which means that, which is good. I mean, that means that Hearthstone is still in a good place and is still like, there's every so often, I don't think we've gotten one in a while, but there's always one of these Hearthstone is dying memes that goes around, every so often, usually towards the end of an expansion when somebody decides to look at Twitch numbers declining naturally over the course of an expansion and then panics. But I think that's a good number to hear. And I mean, we've heard this even like when we had Ben Lee on the show talking about like how many people actually do play Hearthstone, and like if it was on Steam, it would probably be in like the top 3 like games by concurrent players, compared to what's on Steam. So it's cool to see these numbers. First of all, it's just cool to see Hearthstone represented in something like this, because often Hearthstone gets left out in like a lot of the financial statements, but also seeing something that reminds us of what the scope of this game is, and like that the highly engaged players like us are not the only ones playing it is also kind of a good reminder.
Yeah. I think because Hearthstone is a Blizzard game and dwarfed by, say, World of Warcraft, it's and treated that way often, it's easy for us to underestimate. Like if this was pretty much any other company, like this would be the flagship. It's an incredibly popular game, and as you were saying, also 15.8 billion packs. A lot of those surely are coming from real money, as well as gold.
Yeah.
So there's, and this is a really big game that we play, and it's important to remember that when we see those memes happening every few months. I also want to say on this tweet, they have a picture of the line waiting to get in at BlizzCon. That is like the tip of the iceberg. I was like several blocks away, still that crowded, waiting to get in. And I was not slow getting up in the morning.
Yeah. Yeah, this is that picture. I'm putting it up on the stream now. This is the line just to get into BlizzCon. You can see the food trucks that are lined up. I was probably like back at the when I was waiting on day one, I was waiting at like the back of the first pack of food trucks. Like that's where I was. And I had gotten there relatively early. And that line goes all the way back and like around the corner of the Marriott, which is on the left. So it's a massive, massive line. And it's impressive that they got people in as quickly as they are. The other thing, they had this other stat: 150,000 BattleNet accounts have been active for 25 plus years. I actually went to go look if mine was one of them because like I thought I set up a BattleNet account in 97 when I bought Diablo 1, and apparently you can put in a request to get all of your data from Blizzard, which is the only way you can find out. So I did that. It was a pretty quick process. So they basically send you like an encrypted HTML file with all of your data. And I mean all of it. Like match history from Warcraft Rumble, like match history from Heroes of the Storm, like every card in your collection and whether it's golden or not on each server, like all the achievements that you've earned. It's impressive what's there. Apparently my account was only set up in 2010, which I guess was StarCraft 2 probably, which would have been when I set up this account. I probably had lost the password to the other one because I wasn't a WoW player, and so I didn't really have any reason to be playing on BattleNet. But so I was a little sad about that because I was hoping that I was one of those 150,000. But I did learn a little bit about all the data that they have. I mean, they have to, right? Like they have to track data for your accounts in order to run the games. It's not like it's advertising data or anything like that, but it's just kind of like, you know that it's there, but then you see it all laid out in this massive HTML document. It's like, oh yeah, they do have to keep all of that, don't they? So, you know, they know when I've played Hunter, and then I can't hide it from them. It's it's a little bit disturbing, but it is what it is. Oh, and so the other Blizzard specific, or the more general Blizzard news this week is that the Microsoft, as we all know, the Microsoft acquisition closed in the fall, and the announcement was made that Activision CEO Bobby Kotick is leaving Activision Blizzard at the end of next week on the 29th of December, which, given that he was at, a lot of the unpleasantness of the last couple of years had revolved around, what his role was and what he had done or not done. And in general had just, presided over stuff that is not generally not great. And he's been a lot of the influence over Blizzard on, trying to squeeze every penny out of the games and not giving the studios the freedom that Microsoft seems to be doing now. We'll see after they have some time to work, but they're saying the right things, at least, about giving Blizzard the freedom to maneuver the way that they would like to. But in general, like, Bobby Kotick is not a well-liked person, and it is good to see him going out. So there really can be a fresh start for our friends who are working at Blizzard. So it's generally good news. And it would be nice if there was some accountability there, as opposed to him just getting a big payout and leaving. But, the end result is the same at the end of the day.
Yeah, when California sued Activision a couple years ago for the culture of constant harassment, especially sexual harassment at the company, there was definitely links all the way up to Kotick. There was a Wall Street Journal article citing memos and emails saying that Kotick was aware of a lot of the allegations and either didn't do anything or actively tried to downplay them. So on the one hand, that particular thing was never fully litigated or established. I want to be clear, but there certainly was a lot of feeling that, one thing that I can say for sure is that he rather, taking that suit, denied that there had been a problem, that there was ever a problem. And honestly, this makes me feel better about playing Blizzard games.
Yeah.
Because that was something when that happened in 2021 where I was like, can I even play games from this company?
Yeah.
With what was happening at the time. And
yeah.
I can't say exactly what the situation is on that now, but this feels like a step in the right direction.
Yeah, I mean, I was in the same boat. I mean, I was doing content. It's like, well, am I going to be able to keep doing this? And, I mean, I kind of came to a place of, the people who are working there are not all the people who are doing this. I mean, the people profiting from it are to some extent, but I did have to do a reckoning with that. But I ended up coming to a peace with it. But it's a decision that a lot of people, I mean, there were a number of casters who, left after that. And that was the one time I didn't do a card review for Off Curve when I was doing it, because like Man at Arms and I were doing it at the time, and both of us were like, I can't really talk about this right now. Like, I can't get my headspace in it. And I think that was the one time that I didn't buy a pre-order right after that too, because I felt like I needed to do something. But and Day 9, was a very early, I mean, he was in StarCraft, big in the StarCraft scene when StarCraft was a thing, and also was very big in Hearthstone, was in some of the developer reveal videos for some of the expansions, and he had decided he wasn't playing or streaming. I don't know about playing, but he wasn't streaming any Blizzard games until Kotick was leaving, and he left a tweet saying, well, Kotick's leaving, so I don't have to boycott anymore, so I might be doing, look for StarCraft and Hearthstone content from me next year. So that's really exciting. Day 9 is a huge name in the streaming space. He does a lot of Magic stuff. He's just a very well-known streamer, and for him to get back into Hearthstone is a big deal. And it's one of those things, like if he's feeling better about it, it makes, it might lead to a lot of other people feeling better about it too. So, it'll be a good thing. But Kotick leaving, I mean, that was the kind of the big hope with this acquisition, is that was going to lead to it. And it was always kind of like said, yeah, he's going to, but you don't really believe it until he's actually, left the building with a cardboard box. So and he still hasn't, to be clear. It's happened next week, but it sounds like it's and it's not just him, also like the COO of Activision Blizzard as well, who I've heard is also responsible for not necessarily the culture things, but certainly a lot of the other, some of the other not necessarily the sexual harassment things, I should say, but some of the other, workplace environment type things. And she was part of that too, and so she's going to be leaving as well. So Mike Ibarra is going to be reporting to someone in the Microsoft games, and he's still going to be the head of Blizzard. So he's still going to be there and leading that leadership team. This is more at the Activision Blizzard King executive level, most of these departures. That was more of the handling the organization that was managing all of the studios rather than the actual studio leadership themselves. So yeah, so that's the news. But we have some tournaments to talk about, because we had this small world championship that happened last week that we should probably talk about.
It's the clock.
So yeah, we had Worlds, and it was a really, really exciting event, given that it was scaled back from prior years. But despite the fact that it was only 8 players, that it was, a relatively short stream on Sunday, compared, well, I mean, I guess we didn't have an hour and a half priest mirror as part of the as part of the finals, so it's gonna be a little faster, but some of the streams were a little bit faster, but it was a really exciting event, all things considered, because I mean, there was definitely the feeling that you had people who had been working incredibly hard all year and that a lot was on the line, and you really got to see that come out. So what I have up on the stream, and we'll have a link to the show notes to the lineups that were brought. The way that it broke down was that everybody brought Paladin effectively because there wasn't a counter for it. So if there's no counter for the deck, then you bring it, it draws a ban, and everybody's just playing with 3 decks. It didn't actually work out that way. It was kind of surprising that Paladin was left up, and that seemed to be a mistake a lot of the time when people were leaving it up, because they tended to get stomped by it. But that was a choice that some people were making, that they thought they could beat Paladin, and they generally couldn't. But everyone brought Paladin. It was all pure Paladin. 6 of the 8 players brought Naga Demon Hunter. 6 players brought Druids. 3 of them were Dragon Druid. 2 of them were Reno Druid, but they were generally like Reno Druids with duplicates, which worked out better than one would expect, given that a lot of the cards that are duplicates get drawn by other cards. So it's relatively easy to tutor them, and Druid works through its deck fast enough, but still it was a little bit weird. And then 1 Treant Druid. 3 players brought Mage. They were all Rainbow. 3 players brought Nature Shaman. Rekvam and Pocket Train brought Naga Priest. Rekvam brought
medium Pocket Train.
Medium Pocket Train rather. Rekvam brought was the 1 player to bring Odin Warrior, and then Gyu was the 1 player to brought Mech Rogue. No one brought Warlock or Hunter to the event. So we ended up with a David versus Goliath storyline towards the end of it. Pocket Train was the favorite going into this event. I mean, he had gotten to within 1 game of winning the 2nd Masters Tour, won the 3rd Masters Tour. He'd been probably basically the face of competitive Hearthstone for the most part. I mean, me and Rekvam also were streaming a lot of it, but Pocket Train I think was one of the most visible there, and he was very very invested in getting there. And obviously there was the kind of mixed emotions of eliminating McBanterface to get there in the 3rd Masters Tour, but he was clearly the favorite, went through groups unscathed, and was 3-0ing a lot of his matches. So he had pure Paladin, Naga Priest, Naga Demon Hunter, and Dragon Druid. And really it was just like a wrecking ball through most of the bracket. And then there was CJ Kaka. And CJ Kaka I believe he lost to Pocket Train in groups, right? Am I remembering that correctly?
I believe so.
Yeah. So because I think that was yeah. So he lost to Pocket Train. He lost to Pocket Train in groups. Ends up in this decider match against WeQ, the last match of the day on day 1, which ends in this Reno Druid mirror that was one of the wildest games of Hearthstone that I can remember watching. Like, I feel like this game is up there with like Tice pinging himself in the face, with like Pavel Amnesiac, with some of those games that we still remember to this day, like Tom 60229, like keeping Ultimate Infestation in the mulligan, like those types of things. Like, this was up there.
If you have not seen this game, I'm linking it in the show notes. Pause this podcast.
Yes.
If you haven't been spoiled for what happens in this game yet, pause this podcast and go watch it. I will link to the whole thing start, and then the point where it really starts getting good, because fair warning, it is a 30-minute game.
Yes. And it is worth your time. It is absolutely worth your time. And basically the long and the short of it is that both of them are playing Reno decks that have duplicates, right? So their Reno and their Rheastraza are not active at the beginning. Like turn 4, WeQ is discovering a dragon and picks another Rheastraza. And I know I was saying it, I think the caster said it out loud, like, what the hell is he doing picking another Rheastraza when he doesn't even have anything active yet? And that's like way along. And that's because these players are thinking so far ahead and that's why they're there and I'm not, right? Because they're thinking so far ahead that they're thinking down to where this match is likely to go. Long story short, CJ Kaka plays Prison of Yogg-Saron. And Prison of Yogg-Saron plays Tome Tampering and shuffles his hand of like 8 cards back into his deck. And just the fact that CJ Kaka, that his PC survived that, because I probably would have smashed mine to pieces if that had happened to me in that high stakes of a game. I remember this is game 5 of a deciding series, right? So like whoever loses that is eliminated. So you have your tournament life on the line in a game 5 and Yogg decides to Tome Tampering you. It's devastating. And it's like, you don't have any cards. And that was maybe 10 minutes or 15 minutes into the game. And the casters were also saying like, well, this game's over, right? Like this is it. What is he going to do? He has no cards. He's drawing 1 card a turn. What is he going to do? Well, he just kept swimming and he didn't give up.
Kept playing.
Yeah.
You know, WeQ had like a full hand of cards, was to his credit, not getting cocky, right? He was really thinking carefully about what his plays were going to be, trying to put on as much pressure as possible. But CJ Kaka just didn't lose his cool, kept playing, found some draw. When he finally got to them, those 1 mana cards, pretty good at 1 mana, some of those cards. Having an extra if you're drawing your whole deck and hanging on for that long. There was a point where one of the casters was saying like, wait, is this game not over? And Saul keeps going like, no, this game is over. No, this game is over. There's no way this game isn't over. And it started getting into methinks it's doth protest too much situation. Yeah. As we realize it's not over.
It took, and it went for quite a while, and it was like, regardless of what actually happened, right? Like, forget about the plays, like nothing. I mean, there was a lot of things that happened in that game. The fact that a player could have that happen, which is probably one of the most like devastating things that can happen, that you can't plan for. Because like when you put Prison and Yogg-Saron in your deck, you kind of accept the risk that sometimes he's going to punch you in the head. And that he managed to take that in a game of that magnitude and just calm himself down in the middle of the match and then continue playing it to his outs and then ultimately win the game and the match is just like, I gained a million times respect for him. Not that I didn't have respect for him before. Anyone who's in that bracket deserves a lot of respect for the amount of work that they put in. But like, it's almost superhuman, right? Like you have to be a robot to be able to do that and not let your emotions come out a little bit. But he just kind of just stayed calm and just kept playing the game and got there, and then didn't lose another game until he ran into Pocket Train in the finals.
Yeah, the casters were talking about how he seemed like he had plot armor. And who has more plot armor, Pocket Train or CJ Kaka? Because he won like the next 12 games or something just straight.
Because he had to go up through the bracket, right? That was a decider. So then he had to win the elimination match after that, and then get through top 8 and top 4. And he beat Meaty and Rekvam, right? Is that, or no? Pocket Train was it was Pocket Train and Meaty, but he had to play through Rekvam on top of that too. Yeah. And I mean, not that anyone in that who's left in that bracket is not a significant threat, right? Like I would be intimidating run into any of those players on ladder, but but just goes and just 3-0s everybody, and then until he ran into Pocket Train, and then Pocket Train was also 3-0ing everybody, and only one of them was going to be able to do that to the other. And spoiler alert, Pocket Train did win, and but it was like a really exciting final. I mean, Pocket Train also having to play through Gyu in the top 4, I believe. Yeah, and Gyu was the one who eliminated him from the Summer Masters Tour that kept him playing Hearthstone on ladder for another 3 months. So having to kind of exercise that demon. Yeah. And like Pocket Train like was visibly upset after one of his wins. To the point where he had to like tweet afterwards like, "Oh yeah, I'm actually in the top 4, and I need to actually be happy about that," because he was clearly upset about something that he felt like he didn't play right. And I mean, that's one of the things that makes him world champion, is that he's going to be critical of himself even when he's winning, and even when he's not going to be results oriented, like he can see the things that happened and play and try to improve even when he's at that level and he's winning at that level. And that's something that, I mean, I would like it if he was a little bit kinder to himself in the moment. But it's something that you have to be in that mindset in order to be able to play at that level, I think.
And all of the players are incredible to watch. It's one thing that I love about seeing the esports is plays that you would never have thought of. But definitely watching Pocket play, first of all, he never took anything for granted.
Yeah.
He waited to see what was going to happen. He was thinking through every single thing, and just the quality of play is just astonishing, I think, of all the players. But it felt like this was really Pocket's year, and for good reason. And he gave a very articulate, thoughtful interview afterwards, and talked a lot about the community around. He had worked on the lineup with Meaty and with Rekvam and with quite a few other big names in the Hearthstone space, and was so generous with acknowledging everyone who had helped. And it did make me think about how having that community must be extremely helpful for improving as a player. But at the end of the day, he's the one who put in an astonishing number of hours.
Yeah. Potentially unhealthy number of hours, one might say. But I mean, it paid off. And, he had his parents, he thanked his parents who were supporting him through doing this. I mean, that's a hell of a thing to do as a parent, too, to say, I'm going to support you because you're going, to spend a year grinding ladder in a card game because you might win, a large sum of money at the end of it, and to believe in him that much. Like that's pretty amazing as a parent, to support him and allow him to, pursue his dream that way. And for him to be in the moment thinking about that too it was kind of touching. I might have gotten something in my eye a little bit when when watching that. So but it was an exciting end to the season. It was like I was saying last week, I would like it to have been in a LAN, and I still would like have liked it to be at a LAN, because I could imagine what that WeQ CJ Kaka game would be like with a live audience when the Prison of Yogg-Saron went off. But even even given what it was, the given that it was online, it was still like, I tweeted at the time, like, if that is the last official Hearthstone tournament we ever have, we went out on a banger, because it was absolutely really exciting from start to finish.
The whole thing, not even just the Druid Mirror, but it's really worth watching the VODs, whatever you're able to, if there's particular decks that you're curious about. It was a really, really good event.
Yeah. And we're also excited to announce that Pocket Train's going to be our guest next week. So we're going to get to dig in a lot more into what got him to this point, and what he's doing to play at this level, and just what that experience, feels like. We're gonna be able to spend some time with him and kind of get inside the man's brain And I'm glad that there is some left, because I was a little bit worried about mid-year that there might not be any left, given how he was struggling with some of the latter seasons. But I'm glad it was all worth it. So it's gonna be a lot of fun to talk to him next week.
I'm really excited, and given how his interview went at the end of Worlds, I feel he'll practically do our job for us with
Yeah.
being articulate. But we will definitely consider our questions, and really looking forward to that conversation.
Yeah. And so the other news that we sort of got, when we talked about whether this is the last Hearthstone tournament, and it seems like it's not. So there was a tweet from Eric Elliott, who's one of the PR folks for Blizzard Esports, and said there's an announcement coming that they're finalizing the details. So fingers crossed we have esports in 2024. It sounds like, hopefully, like, this system ended up being better to watch than I think a lot of us thought it was going to be at the beginning of the year. But also, I mainly hope that whatever they come up with is a little bit more humane for the people participating. Like, as exciting as this was, there were a lot of people who either could not participate at all because of the requirements of the amounts of ladder that they were going to have to grind, or ended up just like bailing after a while just because like the sheer grind is too much. And like there's going to be a grind in any esports system, but like this was incredibly demanding in terms of time and just like sanity really on the part of the players of having to grind that much ladder. So hopefully it did end up with a good result in terms of the quality of players that we got, but hopefully whatever that they're going to come up with 24 maintains that quality of play while being a little bit more realistic in terms of the time required and the kind of sustained effort that's needed, because like it's very easy for people to burn out on this, and then we just don't have we end up killing the Hearthstone scene from the other direction if we're not careful. So, but that's enough esports until next week, when we'll talk a lot more. But we have some balance changes to talk about, because we haven't even gotten to those yet, and we're an hour in, so we should probably get there, because there is a lot to talk about there too.
All right. So, as you are probably aware, we also got a lot of balance changes. They had said that they were going to do a balance patch after Worlds to set up for the holidays. The place where we were at, they knew that it would probably be the case, and then of course that we saw the place we were at with Paladin, especially, was not where they wanted us to be stuck for the entire holiday break. I do think that having the expansion come out a little bit earlier than it sometimes has probably really helped in having this window to get more balance changes in before the holiday break. So they say this patch is the last scheduled patch for the year. And they talked about how their overall goals for the patch are to make buffs across underperforming classes, decks, and cards, especially from the current expansion, and to weaken a few overperforming decks that are keeping other decks down. They do emphasize that they are not trying to kill decks, as has generally been their philosophy of the past year, at least, of wanting mostly to nerf in a way that doesn't kill archetypes if they can, but that help keep things from being meta warping. They say Paladin has been the biggest overperformer since the last adjustment. They targeted the AoE board clears, namely Keeper's Strength and Prismatic Beam, because they say that's a mechanic we want Paladin to have access to, but not excel in. They say there are other potential targets that they looked at, but there were other cards that were more in line. Those other cards were more in line with what they want Paladin's class strengths to be. I do think that targeting the AoE for Paladin makes sense in that It's a really aggressive snowbally deck where normally the way you fight against really aggressive snowbally decks is you keep them off the board. Um, you make your own board and then they just can't get back on it. I do think one should have some AoE as a snowbally deck. As a snowbally deck, if you have it so that you literally have no way to get board back, that feels terrible. But for your opponent, if you can just always get board back or kill any giant board that ever threatens you, uh, unless you have one of those games where all 4 of your AoEs are in the bottom of your deck, which of course I did have. But the fact that I was mostly only losing games where my AoEs were at the bottom of my deck was saying these are what's really powerful in making it so that it's really hard to counter or find any way to play against this deck, because you win board against it, they don't care. If you don't contest the board, then they make giant things and hit you in the face. So
yeah. And I think the other problem with the Paladin AoE, at least in the form that we have it right now, is that they're always developing along with the AoE, right? So like when they're playing Prismatic Beam, they're playing it with Showdown. So they're getting 3/3/3s and then blowing yours away. Like when they're playing Keeper Strength, they're making a big thing and then wiping the rest of the board with it. So they have one big tall minion that you now have to deal with. Like normally when you have like a powerful board wipe like that, it's coming at a cost of tempo, right? Where I think we've talked about this a couple times where if I think we talked about this with when Yogg got nerfed, really, where when you get to clear the board at no cost to tempo, that's when things get really degenerate. Like if it's a difference between like 0 mana Yogg and like a Whirlpool, right? Like if I'm Whirlpooling, I'm clearing the board, but I'm also spending 8 mana, which gives you an opening to be able to develop behind it. This is clearing the board, but also leaving a big threat behind, or several big threats behind, that then you have to deal with before you can develop your own tempo in return. And that's where it gets really oppressive, right? That's why an aggro deck can run AoE, because it's so strong and because there's no loss to tempo to do it, which is the reason that aggro decks typically don't run AoE, because they don't want to wipe out their own boards. Here, even if you wipe out some of your board with Keeper Strength, it's not really that big of a deal.
yeah, these are very proactive AoEs, which on the one hand kind of fits Paladin, like from a flavor perspective, but on the other hand has all the problems that you say. Although I will say part of what I think can be frustrating about Reno is that Reno is a very one-sided board clear that allows you to keep
Right.
all of your tempo and deny your opponent any tempo. All of these clears are doing things where they are grabbing control of the board, not resetting it so much, or not just resetting it. Specifically, the changes that were made, Keeper Strength went from 4 mana to 5 mana, Prismatic Beam went from 7 mana to 8 mana, and importantly, no longer goes face. I have still been facing Paladin some. Still seems like a good deck. They haven't cut these cards. It's just a little bit slower and they can't necessarily fit as much stuff in on the same turn while they're doing it. Also, you're not just also taking that extra 3 damage from Prismatic Beam, Salt in the Wound.
Yeah, that didn't need to go face. That really didn't need to go face. It was good enough without it. Like, I forgot that it went face when I was playing the deck. I'm like, oh, wait, this goes face too? That's disgusting. Why does that go face? And now it doesn't. So...
And yeah, I think that made a lot of people happy, because I was seeing a lot of complaints about Paladin and its strength, and understandably given the win rate that it was putting out. But hope if you enjoyed playing Paladin, absolutely still playable. They also made a couple of stat adjustments to Dragon Druid. So Splish Splash Whelp went from a 2/1 to a 1/1, and Desert Nest Matron, the free taunt, 4 mana but actually free taunt, went from a 3/5 to a 3/4. They say Dragon Druid was another outlier with a strong matchup spread. We like the deck's general patterns and players seem to be excited by it, so we just wanted to shave a little power from it to make it more attackable in the early game. So Splish Splash Whelp is still absolutely incredible. This is the Costume Singer nerf. You're absolutely playing this card. This doesn't change any of that, but at least you're not also contesting board with it.
Yeah. Like the effect is great. It doesn't need to be a good body on top of it. Like I definitely got some questions this week. Like, well, why didn't this go to 3 mana? Because if this goes to 3 mana, you kill the card, right? If this goes to 3 mana, you're just playing Wild Growth instead. Because Wild Growth it doesn't come with a body, but it's also not conditional. Like Splish Splash Whelp doesn't go in everything. Like Fire Druid wasn't running Splish Splash Whelp because it didn't have room for it, right? That was running Wild Growth. So this means that you're playing a dragon deck, which is why you get to ramp on 2, which is very strong, but with a fairly significant deck building restriction. That means that, yeah, that's the only druids that we're playing right now, but that's not always going to be the case, right? Like they're not necessarily going to print a lot more powerful dragons, and some of the dragons that we have now are going to rotate. So this may get better, this may get worse at rotation, and then still be, a strong effect with a drawback. But the thing with Splish Splash Whelp is that it could also trade off most of the minions that you're seeing play at that point. Like if your opponent plays a Miracle Salesman, you were fine playing a Splish Splash Whelp into it because either they had to spend turn 2 pinging it off, or you could trade off their Miracle Salesman with it. This isn't trading off anything as a 1/1. I mean, I guess not other Splish Splash Whelps, I guess. But like there aren't that many 1 health minions that are left in standard that early, so it's not going to do as much work except for Paladin. But I mean, if you're even then you still have to probably go through a Divine Shield most of the time. But so like it's going to be a little bit more fair, at least in terms of not letting you develop when you're playing it. And as far as Nestmatrix is concerned, like we've talked, I can't remember how many times about the difference between 4 health and 5 health as a breakpoint. Just in terms of especially like what can trade into it at that point in the game. Like being the fact that you can have a 4/4, like a posit can trade it off now where it couldn't before. Right? So or like an ETC that somebody's playing can now trade that off where it would have needed help before. It's the same thing that we've talked about with Sharpshooter, with other things. Like the difference between 4 health and 5 health is a big deal. And I mean, it's still a powerful card, but it's going to be a little bit more attackable. And if sometimes you only have to trade one thing in where you used to have to trade 2. That's a big deal.
That's a big deal, especially on a taunt, and especially in a deck that only just ramps up both literally and figuratively if you let it live. And this taunt was a huge thing that was getting in your way, and still is. I think it's still a powerful card, and Druid is doing fine. The Drum Druid that I played was good. There is a Treant Druid we'll talk about in a bit, but there's an extremely budget friendly and also extremely powerful Treant Druid deck that has almost all commons and a few rares, and that's it. And it's reminiscent of the older aggro druids from like a few expansions ago that were the same thing, where they were very cheap except for like composting. Here we don't even have any epics. You're just playing a bunch of treants. They keep making more treants. You buff them with the +2/+2 to all your minions, like it's cheaper for every treant.
Cultivate? Is that cultivation? Yeah.
One of those 2.
Yeah.
I was playing it all day and I can't remember. So Druid has powerful decks in its arsenal, and of course there's still Reno druids of all stripes. So it makes sense to make all of them a little bit more attackable in the early game. They also hit Staff of the Nine Frogs, which is generated by Dr. Holiday. We've definitely talked about this. It went from 2/9 to a 1/9, so it only has 1 attack now. Otherwise, it is still the same card, still very powerful. You're still getting your frogs exactly the same way as you were before. You can still summon up to 9 of them, but you're doing half as much damage with the weapon itself. And that was always like one factor of Reno Shaman just like being this random pile of cards that still gets there because you're doing 2 damage with your Reno Hero Power and 2 damage with your weapon, and lots of other ways that there's just inevitable, inexorable damage going face. Yeah. And the note from the devs is Dr. Holiday is the best card in Standard. It's important for a Highlander payoff card to be worth the cost of putting it into your deck, but we wanted to rein this one in a bit. We shaved one attack off the weapon to reduce the overall power while preserving the coolest part of the card, frogs. And by best card in standard, they mean for things like the mulligan win rate on this card was
And
absolutely
played
insane.
win rate too. I mean, I think the played win rate was also highest, which is impressive for a card that doesn't actually like win you the game on the spot. Right? Like, I mean, like Sif, I think probably Sif probably had a higher play win rate, but for cards that aren't only played when you win the game, I think it had the highest play win rate of anything also. Like the play win rate was like something like 64%, I think, which is amazing for a card that's not just like Pyroblast. That only gets played when you're winning, right? So and like it's important, like you can look at this and say, well, what does the 1 damage on the weapon do? That cuts the damage output in half. The damage that the weapon does goes from 18 to 9, assuming that you swing with it, get all 9 swings with it. That's a lot of damage. Like 18 by itself with the weapon is something that you could conceivably do if you got it down on curve. That's why it was so good in the mulligan, because like if you get it down early, like it's hard to answer that. You get the frogs to ramp up, and oh, by the way, I'm hitting you in the face for 2 every turn, and that adds up over the course of the game. So like you also just can't trade things off with it as easily. Again, we just talked about this with Splish Splash Whelp, but it's the same thing. Like if you one damage is helping something along, but it's not necessarily going to trade off like a Miracle Salesman. It's going to help, but it's not going to get there. So there's a cost to the weapon now. But it still does some damage, and the frogs are the coolest part of it, and that should be why you're swinging it. Like you shouldn't just be getting there with the damage from the weapon itself.
It's about the frogs. I mean, this is like Cariel's weapon. The fact
Right.
that it did 2 damage every turn forever was low-key one of the best parts of the card that often got underestimated, and I think same here. Reno Shaman, I haven't really seen a lot of it. I think that's less due to this nerf and more due to there being more Plague Death Knights than there used
Yeah.
to be. But regardless, even if this card was the one thing propping up Reno Shaman, which I don't think is true, but you don't want a deck to be so lopsided in that it has like one card that is carrying things that hard. So it makes sense if you have one card that's that much of an outlier, somewhat regardless, to give it a nudge, especially in a Highlander deck.
And you could feel it, right? Like generally my test with that, and that goes all the way back to Call to Arms, right? Is like the games that I lose, did I draw that card? And the games that I win, did I draw that card? And like if that lines up pretty closely, like that card's probably a problem and needs to get nerfed. And that was the case with Call to Arms. And I like in retrospect, like the games that I won with Reno Shaman typically are the ones that I had Holiday on curve too. So it's just like that much better, and it's just like that swingy, right? Like once you get above 60% on mulligan win rate, like and that much above like the average win rate of the deck, right? Like when there's that much variance between a single card and the rest of the deck, that's when you need to start looking at it.
Yeah. Last nerf they had was a light touch to Rainbow Mage. Once again, they say there's 2 versions of Rainbow Mage, both of which are pretty strong and popular. They don't want to kill the decks, just keep them in line with other decks they're adjusting in this patch. This change makes them a little worse at muddying up the early board while developing their game plan, and that change is making Arcane Worm a 1/1 instead of a 1/2. So a very light change. As much as I see mages on ladder, I am glad they didn't do something like really nail Sif, because that I think would kill the deck, and we don't have. It's really this, and to some extent, although in a very different way, Naga Demon Hunter, we don't have a lot of sort of damage-based, more combo-y decks in the format, and this is for a combo-y type of deck, I think both very fun and loved, and one of the less objectionable ones I can think of. And certainly if you compare this to like Quest Mage, I think it garners a lot less hostility.
Yeah.
So I don't mind seeing that being a fairly light touch, and something like Paladin is actually happy to see that 1/1 instead of 1/2, because if you have a like now it trades off with one of your Silverhand recruits, or it trades off with your 1/1 Divine Shield taunt, uh, because just getting that one a couple trades in with that 1 health actually can make a difference sometimes.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, you just have these games with Mage where sometimes some of these like janky early game minions that are just there for battle cries like stick around. And that's enough damage to just kind of chip away to make the rest of the deck get there. And so that dying a little bit sooner is going to be good. And I mean, remember that like a lot of the stuff that's making Sith Mage really dangerous right now is rotating. Like Arcane Worm was March of the Lich King. Frozen Touch, it's not really run, but it's there, right? Is was that was Nathria. Lady Nazjar was Sunken City. That's a big thing to enable the combo. That's going away, right? So like a lot of the support cards for Sith Mage are going out, and they don't necessarily have to replace them. So like Sith Mage as we know it may not really be as viable post rotation. So better to leave Sif alone for the time being, and then if it's still an issue, fine, then nerf it, or at least nerf it temporarily. But being able to deal with the ways that Mage can just kind of be a tempo deck early on top of that, I think is good. And this is a reasonable change. And we'll get to the Barrel of Sludge changes, but that kind of is a little bit of a nerf to Rainbow Mage as well, because they would run Tram Conductor, which would give them a Barrel of Sludge as a fel spell. So that also is like kind of a sideways nerf to Mage as well.
absolutely. And we have Goku in chat saying Arcane Worm dies to the Staff of Primus now.
Yeah.
So that's one other thing. Or the 1/3 Excavate weapon that all the rogues are running. We'll get to Rogue in a second. Those were all of the nerfs. We also had a temporary ban of Pyrotechnician. We had mentioned Fire Druid last week. The dev comment, if we had a nickel for each time a problematic druid deck was refined after we locked our balanced patch contents, we'd have like 2 to 3 nickels, which isn't a lot, but it's enough that we wanted to take quick action before we left for the year. They were not able to get a balance change for Fire Druid into this patch, but they were able, the only thing they could do with that late notice was temporarily ban one of the cards, and they chose Pyrotechnician, since there's no way you would play it in anything else. So
Yeah.
it's not disrupt, but it is absolutely central to that deck. There's also no way that when they banned Jailer, it just didn't kill anything. Just found a new way. Here, Pyrotechnician definitely is going to hit that particular deck. So that doesn't necessarily mean that they'll be hitting Pyrotechnician itself, but when they get another balance patch, they will do something to address Fire Druid and then unban Pyrotechnician. So if you were looking forward to playing that deck, I'm sorry, you missed your window, or you had your window however much you played. But if you were not enjoying playing against that deck, congratulations. You don't have to, at least for now, play against Fire Druid.
I would imagine that Paladin slowing down or lessening in prevalence also would have an effect on that, because like one of the things that was really keeping it down was getting hit in the face. And the less decks that are able to hit you in the face, or the less quickly they're able to hit you in the face, and the more likely you are to be able to get that to go off. So I think that's a wise move. I think that there were concerns about that being at least a top legend. Like, it's a hard deck to play. You would lose with it a lot more than you won with it, but it's just like Thaddeus can't rotate soon enough, honestly. Just please. Like, all the stupid stuff that Thaddeus is enabling, I get it, but it's like they've tried to nerf it. It's still like the nerf version now is a problem. Like, just please get it out of standard already. And maybe we can, not have all this nonsense. But the latest that I've heard is not Pyrotechnician, but something involving Rivendare, I think. So I'm sure Druid is going to figure something else out before the next balance patch, but whatever. I mean, Druid's going to Druid. It's fine.
How can we abuse having tons of mana too early? There's always There's always something, but it is part of a type of deck that is going to exist regularly in Hearthstone. Some broken druid something. However, we also got a lot of buffs. We'll go through these by class. I'll try to be quick on it. We already talked some about Priest, but the Priest changes were first Elise, Badland Savior. Instead of summoning 4/4 copies, the 4 random minions in your deck now summons 5/5 copies. There was also a change to Pip the Potent. Instead of being a 4 mana 3/5, she is now a 3 mana 3/3. So the bad news there is that Animate Dead, she doesn't work as well with the Animate Dead pool because now she's in it. The good news is it's a lot easier to fit her into your curve to copy your 1-drops. The problem I was always having with her is that I had this big tension between like, do I play her or do I just play the 1-drops that are in my hand and not lose tempo? So 3 mana instead of 4 makes that a lot easier. There was also a change where Invasive Shade Leaf, which is the 4 mana shadow spell, it deals 10 damage instead of previously 8 to an enemy minion and saves any excess in a 1-cost bottle. And lastly, Rawden now has Taunt. And Rawden being Death Rattle, summon each other minion you've played this game that didn't start in your deck. The dev comment was that Priest hasn't been able to find its footing in the Badlands, so they're adjusting 3 of its legendaries and 1 additional card. They say, we wanted to improve the new archetypes without just buffing Control Priest, which is currently on a razor's edge. So this makes me think, I was having a discussion with Wicked about this a little bit before the show. Sometimes I think they buff cards, mainly just to get us to try again. Like, we promise, guys, there's something here.
Yeah.
We're going to give a really minor buff to this to make you try it again, because we promise there's a deck here.
Yeah, and like I'm coming around to that. Like I will say, like I was trying to play a Highlander Priest before the buffs, and I found a list, and the only list I found actually cut Elise from it. It was just running Reno, which is like, okay, that kind of tells you everything you need to know about where sentiment was before. After having played it, I stand by my original comment that the size of the minions doesn't matter. Like 4/4 and 5/5, like, yeah, it's a little bit better, especially if you're getting a rush. It's gonna trade off a little bit more. Like the taunt might live through a couple more, like it might need 2 tits to get through instead of 1, but like at 8 mana, like those things don't matter as much, just because like your opponent's gonna have access to every board clear that they're gonna have access to. The minions are generally bigger, so like those kinds of breakpoints don't really matter as much. But and like you're talking about if everything goes face the following turn, which is, you know, optimistic, but whatever, then you're talking about like 24 damage instead of 19, right? So okay, fine. But I think that it probably was good enough before, but we weren't trying it. And like, you know, like you were saying, like this feels like, hey, why don't you guys try this? It's better now. Try it again. And see if it works better. Now, the other buffs do help. Rawden having Taunt makes it easier to include.
That's huge.
Especially with Elise, right? Because now when you're putting it in, it's not like a vanilla 5/5 that they can ignore. It's a 5/5 with Taunt that they have to go through that then replaces itself, theoretically. I mean, not always, but a lot of the time. So that helps a lot. Presumably it would be better in like the automaton decks too, but I'm not interested in trying to lose MMR and Astro Automaton again. And like
there
extra
are experiments going around, but I'm actually in a similar boat despite my Priest experimentation roots of, I hope someone figures this out. I'm going to wait for now.
Yeah, exactly. And like the extra damage on Shade Leaf is nice. I don't love the card, but you kind of need to run it in a Highlander deck, and being able to remove 2 minions with it instead of like 1.5 is generally better. So, and I mean, Pip the Potent is pretty clear. Like it's a pretty clear Naga Priest. You know, like you say, it's a little bit of a sideways buff because it does hurt Animate Dead, but I think you're probably okay with that. With that small amount of risk.
That's not something that Naga Priest per se is running. I think some other like Automaton Priest or some of the overheals is probably not happy to see that, but there was already no animate dead in Naga Priest, and it really I played some Naga Priest, and while that tension is interesting between like, do I play Pip, do I play my one cost cards, it's feels much better. It almost felt anti-synergistic before in a way.
Yeah,
Now it really
yeah.
feels like I can play a tempo deck this way, while also getting some value. There has also been some OTK experimentations utilizing like bounty board and so it's Mindseer. There's more than one version of this, but
Oh my
basically
god.
you get a bunch of Pip the Potents. You get a light bugs bottle with at least 5 in it. You copy a ton of Mindseers. You get an Arcanist. I have to look at how you fit this all in to
Oh my god.
to your mana. So you have an Arcanist and you have Mindseer and you have your own 1/1s in case they didn't provide you with enough targets. And then you can deal 30 damage in a turn that way. Um,
I
it
mean,
seems highly
A
ambitious.
plus for creativity. You know, like sure.
It is possible now, so if that is something, there's also, I'm sure, potentially something with the minion that changes your next healing spell into damage, although it's hard because it's only your next healing spell. So people, yeah, have been experimenting with
Yeah.
Mindseer OTKs. And yeah, even just the extra 2 damage for Shade Leaf means that the bottle you get out of it is going to be that much better.
Yeah. Which I mean, with Love Everlasting is not nothing, right? Like being able to keep Love Everlasting going and remove a minion, that's significant. So like these cards have felt better. They're small changes, and like I said, I don't think I stand by my original feeling that the size of the minions on Elise don't matter, but I think that is more because Elise was probably better than we thought, but we hadn't really figured out what the right build was, and I think the state of the meta, the way that it was before, like especially when Mage was as prevalent as it was, like you can't play a slower deck like this. It doesn't matter, and I think there's a little bit. I don't know. I haven't seen as much Reno, which it also makes Elise bad, right? Because you're always having to play around Reno with Elise if you're playing against a deck that runs Reno. Because like if you spend 8 mana to put five bodies on the board and they respond with Reno, that's terrible for you. I mean you can sometimes power chord synchronize it, like that's a thing you can do, but or you get it out of creation protocol, but you generally would rather that not happen. But I've been seeing less Renos in general. It's I guess with the change to Shaman and to a lesser extent the change to Druid. So
Yeah, I've been seeing less as well. Instead, what I've been seeing a lot of is Rogue. We had 3
yeah,
changes to Rogue. The Azurite Scorpion, the Rogue Excavate Treasure, is still get 4 random spells. Previously, they were if you've excavated 8 times, they cost 0. Now they cost 1 less for each time you've excavated this game, but not less than 1. So that's usually going to be, if you play it right after you get it, that'll be 4. Cost 4 less at most, but not less than 1. Their reasoning, they said, for not wanting it to cost 0 was that they did not want Azurite Scorpion to just be grist for Draka. And
thank
that
you.
definitely goes into So some spells are not really going to get discounted much at all off of this. Whereas other ones really will. You do generally end up with just a bunch of 1-cost spells.
Yeah.
When you play the Azurite Scorpion now, I have played a few games. There's lots of different versions running around.
Yeah. And it's worth mentioning if the spell costs 0, it continues to cost 0. It just can't get discounted below 1.
That is important. Yes, if you get an Innervate or something, it will still work as intended. Or I saw a lot of opponents get the Death Knight Refresh 2 Mana Crystals card.
Oh,
Seems like every
gross.
opponent. And then they play 2 other spells they got, and I'm like,
Ugh.
really? Also really good now, despite us not understanding it at all when it came out. Velarak Windblade. Previously, it said, while this is in your hand, play 3 cards from other classes to reveal Velarak's true form being a 3/6 charge. That says, discover a card from another class. And I believe it costs 3 less when you get it.
Sure. I don't actually remember because when I do see this card, I'm just annoyed and I'm not paying attention to what it says. So.
Hold on, let me just make sure I'm saying this card correctly. Before I move on. Yes. Charge after this attacks, discover a card from another class. It costs 3 less. Now, instead of having to play 3 cards from other classes to reveal Velarak's true form, you just have to play 1 card from another class to reveal Velarak's true form. That is a big difference. Now you get a 3/6, 3-mana 3/6 charge, and a quite possibly free, this one can be free, card from another class, and if you leave it up, you get another one. And so I've been seeing a lot of this card, even if you're not doing Excavate, if you're doing any sort of other thief rogue type stuff, that's enough that you'll activate this. Or I've been seeing this in decks with like Wishing Well, some with Wishing Well and Excavate, some with Wishing Well without Excavate. Like, this is just a solid card for rogue now.
Yeah.
Lastly, they also took Shell Game, which was to get a random epic rare and common card from other classes, from 3 mana to 2 mana. I've seen this one some, not a lot, but the 2 previous changes have been enough to see an explosion of rogues on ladder. Important to note, their win rate is like about 50%. Some versions are over a little bit, some versions are under a little bit. However, it's quite unrefined right now. There's definitely room for improvement on it. Honestly, if we had an archetype this messy and it already had a across-the-board positive win rate, I would be very spooked, especially because people do not need a reason to play this kind of deck.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
they just need an excuse to play it. They don't need a reason.
Exactly. Yeah. Like this is, I'm gonna be a little bit less measured than I normally am. I'm fully on the record as as to my feelings about Thief Rogue. Like I'm not going to apologize for not liking Thief Rogue as a competitive archetype. I understand why it needs to exist because, you know, there are a lot of different types of players for this game, and this is the kind of deck that really appeals to casual players because they get to play with cards that they don't have. They get to do wild and wacky things. Like, I get it. I don't have a problem with Thief Rogue existing. I don't love Thief Rogue getting buffed into competitive viability where you can play against it at high ladder. Like, I feel like if I want to play against that, I will play Tavern Brawl. Like, if I'm playing on ladder, I'm trying to play, you know, a little bit more strategic, and I'm not looking for just playing a bunch of random stuff. And this is the control player in me who is looking for weaknesses in opposing decks and exploiting them, right? You cannot do that with a bunch of random nonsense. So I'm just saying that up front before I say this, just so that you're very clear about what my opinions are. My opinions are not necessarily that of the entire Coin Conceit podcast. And I recognize that there is a bit of bias in what I'm about to say. That all said, I appreciate that the Thief Rogue cards were not hitting in the way that they were printed. I don't know how I feel about them going this far into buffing them, particularly Velarak. Like, because like, and there's like a meme that rogue cards get, you know, nerfed less and buffed harder, right? I'm not even trying to go there, but like any other card, right, would have gone from 3 cards to 2 cards if it had this text on it, I feel. And like, I don't know why we needed to go from 3 to 1. Like, why we couldn't go from 3 to 2, make a stepwise change, see how it goes, and then if it's still not being played, then we buff it to 1, right? Like, I mean, I was pretty vocal about Elise saying that like the minions needed rush or taunt or some way to limit the pool or something, and they got a +1/+1 buff that, you know, it matters in terms of reinvigorating interest in the archetype, but it doesn't matter in terms of the card's performance. This is not that. This is not, hey, come look at this card again. This is, it behaves very differently, and like there's a difference between having to go in on Thief Rogue to get it to work and getting cards from other classes incidentally, which you can do just by like playing potions, right? You get the potion that creates something from another class. Like you can just get there are a lot of cards that will just give you stuff from other classes. You can just run Sketchy Strangers, which in like a Secret Rogue, if you want to do that, right? You don't have to do the same kind of investment in order to be able to get this to go off with 1 versus 3, where you're really committing to a Thief Rogue. And then it's a charge in a class with Shadow Steps and Breakdances and whatever. So I really don't love this, and I don't love how much Thief Rogue there is on ladder. Again, it's early, that might drop off, but like I don't really understand why we had to go this hard into making an archetype playable that people are already incentivized to want to play, right? It's not like, like, oh, come try Highlander Priest. Again, I'm keep making the same comparison, but those are the two things we just talked about. Like, come play Highlander Priest. We promise it's good, right? But it's a lot of work, and you have to figure out the right build for it. And there's a lot of there's going to be things to chase them off, as opposed to people just want to play Thief Rogue. You don't have to give them a lot of reason to, but that also doesn't mean that the payoffs need to be that good in order to get people to play the deck.
Yeah, I mean, what can make this a little difficult, like, this is an archetype that's loved by top Legend players, so that makes it hard, who are also really incentivized to play competitive decks. And so it's hard to satisfy both ends of that while also not having it be competitive. I definitely see, I think I get a little bit less tilted by Thief Rogue because I'm usually not playing a control deck.
Right.
And I'm usually doing, there's a Day 9 video where he's like, if your opponent is doing some strange and unusual thing, the number one strategy is to just kill them. Add a swear word in there. This is it's like, don't try to figure out how to counter this stuff. Just attack them, which tends to be more my strategy. I think you do remember the times when they high rolled into something that no one could have predicted that they got, that they would get, but it's not as consistent as like the Countess is, where on the Countess, like, you don't know what's coming, but it's probably winning them the game, or at least getting them close to winning the game. The main thing that I think is frustrating about it is that it's really hard to know what to play around, because you just can't know what to play around. Yeah. You don't even know what they discovered often. Like, the Azurite Scorpion isn't to discover. So I definitely understand that, and I can feel that sometimes. But I also see why people love to play it.
Oh yeah.
And it's not without weaknesses, but there are. It is an emotional management. As Hat was saying today on the Discord, facing this deck a lot can be a game of managing, trying not to overfixate on the times when they just got complete BS. To get you out, which, sometimes I say this as if I'm like this person who doesn't get tilted, which, if you ask my boyfriend, he would tell you is very not true.
And like I said, I'm not saying that if you enjoy this that you're wrong. Like, I'm not saying that. I understand why people enjoy it. I'm not even necessarily saying that you shouldn't enjoy it or that's a bad thing. I'm saying that, like, you don't need to push it that hard to get people to play it. I think that's what I'm saying, and that, like, when we get into trouble is when we push it so hard that it's also competitively viable, and that's when things get frustrating, right? Especially because, like, it does, I don't want to say invalidates, because that's being probably over dramatic, but the just kill them approach doesn't work when you are someone who likes to play control. Like, that's just, it's not an option. And like, that can push other types of valid ways to play out of the meta. That's, and you know, it's like, that's the kind of experience that some people are looking for, is like an actual like strategy game where you're going in based on what your opponent's doing, and then you're planning around what they're going to do, and you're lining up your answers, and there's already a lot of Discover in the meta as it is, in standard in 2023. But like, when it's just like, I'm just going to throw my deck up in the air and see where it lands. Like, if I'm just going to play a deck full of Chaos Orbs from Magic, which was, I have it up on my wall, so I can actually just look at it, because I have one of the oversized ones on my wall. But it was a card from Magic where you would literally just like flip it onto the board, and whatever it landed on, it would destroy. Like, you know, and of course there are some people who had more money than sense that would cut it up into lots of little pieces and then sprinkle it down onto the board. That's you know, you do whatever you want to. But like, when we're doing that, right, like, it's just, that's not fun for other people who are looking for other things from the game. And when that becomes too much, it becomes, you know, problematic. I don't know if we're going to stay that way. I'm not going to overreact to it, but I was surprised at how hard we were going in on making the Burgle Roads cards good beyond just like playable, I guess, is what I'm trying to say.
All right. Well, I want to see if I think those were the classes we had the most to say about. So we'll try to speed a little bit. We still have 3 classes that were buffed, because there was a lot of buffs. So Warlock. The first thing was a change to Barrel of Sludge. So it used to be, you know, and this was generated by lots of cards, mostly in Warlock. It used to be that it was 2 mana. When this is played, discarded or destroyed, deal 3 damage to the lowest health enemy. Now it is 3 mana, but it deals 4 damage to the lowest health enemy. Kind of a side grade there for itself, but it does more when it's destroyed, and most of the time you're not playing it, you are destroying it.
Warlock.
In Warlock specifically, it is a downgrade for Mage, but for Warlock, if you have ways to not play it directly, this is helpful. Popguard the Putrid got changed to compensate. So instead of your fell spells cost 1 less and have lifesteal, now your fell spells cost 2 less and have lifesteal. So your Barrels of Sludge still cost 1. They also changed Furnace Fuel from 4 mana to 3 mana. That was when this is played, discarded or destroyed, draw 2 cards. Their comment is, Sludge Warlock is a cool deck that hasn't landed. We didn't think there was a good way to make the deck perform it without changing the sludges themselves, but we didn't want to push them too far and turn this into an OTK deck. This change makes them more potent when you dispose of them without making them too strong as played, but the Popgar adjustment means the sludges still cost 1 with Popgar out. So I've been having fun when I have been playing Sludge Warlock. It is, at least as I played, not necessarily an OTK deck, although the one that I played just before the show does have Steam Cleaner in it. And I did get them down from like 20 with the Steam Cleaner. Was a Paladin too. I cleared their board and then got them down with the Steam Cleaner, which was very satisfying. It feels a lot better to play. The 4 damage, you know, on the one hand, it was hard to do without really going in on the sludge, because you really don't want to be paying 3 mana for it most of the time, since you can't aim it. But the straight sludge was fun. And I saw Edel earlier saying that she was playing Curse Sludge. We'll have to ask her about
she
that
was originally
next week.
playing Imp Sludge, and I think she moved to Curse Sludge. So yeah, I guess you just get them every way but on the board. I guess is the way that you're doing that. And I mean, I think that there's a couple of things here. One is that the more damage that the sludges do, the less times that they're going to hit minions, and the more times that they can hit face, just because that's how the breakpoints work. So, because like the problem with Sludge Warlock was always like finishing, because you'd have all these sludges, but then your opponent would just have a bunch of stuff on board and they would kill. Now, Paladin taking a step back also helps here, because if anyone's going to go wide, it's going to be Paladin. and then it's very hard for the sludges to get through. So I think that also helps, but I do like them increasing the cost to make it a little bit harder for Mage to make use of it, because Mage would just run Tramp Conductor just because it was a 2-cost 3 fel spell to get their spell schools up. At 3 mana, that's a little bit more of a consideration, given that it's not going to go face most of the time, and you certainly can't weave it into your OTK with Sif easily. It's just too expensive for that. But they may still run it just to get a fel spell out, but it's going to cost them a little bit more to do it. So it's, again, a little bit of a sideways nerf to Mage. But yeah, everything's going to be fine. And like Furnace Fuel, if you weren't actually discarding it, it felt really bad to pay 4 mana to draw 2. Like, that just felt awful.
Now it's an Arcane Intellect that you might be able to get for free. So
yeah,
that feels a lot better. And the list that I was playing was also playing the fatigue cards, and it was just really fun to finally be playing those and have them feel good. Having that AoE was helpful for dealing with a wide board. Having the extra bodies on board that are pretty big was helpful for dealing with their wide board. I destroyed a paladin by completely dominating their board as a sludge warlock.
wow.
And most of the damage, they were trying to trade with me after the first couple turns, which maybe was a misplay on their part. But so again, I played that particular list one time, so grain of salt. But it's worth experimenting with.
And I guess the point that's worth mentioning is that Crescendo is now free with Popcar, which is the reason that people are playing the Imps with it, because the Imps also fatigue, so that buffs up the damage on your Crescendo so that your Crescendo can clear when you're playing Popcar and make way for the sludges to go face.
And it gets lifesteal, so it doesn't matter that it's hurting you for a bunch, because it's healing you. Yeah.
Yeah, so it cancels out the damage it does to your face and then heals you for everything you do to your opponent. You get however much it is from your opponent's face, then times that for every minion. So you probably heal up to full at the end of that. So.
All right. We also have Death Knight. So Ma and Pa went from a 1/8 to a 2/8. That's at the end of your turn, gain 5 corpses. At the start of your turn, spend 5 corpses to give your hero +5 health. Climactic Necrotic Explosion, which was the rainbow 10 mana spell. They just increased all of the numbers by 1. So it used to be lifesteal, deal 5 damage. Now it's 6 damage. Summon 2 1/1 souls. Now it's summon 3 2/2 souls. And it, as before, randomly improved by corpses you've spent. So it just starts 4 corpses better. And lastly, Corpse Bride is now summons grooms with taunt. So now it says spend up to 10 corpses to summon a risen groom with taunt and that much attack and health. So this is, I think, trying to work on corpse spending rainbow archetypes. I haven't really seen anything since this happened.
I mean, Corpse Bride is like the fetch of Demon Hunter, or of Death Knight rather. Like it's just, they keep trying to make Corpse Bride happen, and it just does not seem like it's going to happen. I mean, giving it taunt is better, but this is like the second time they've buffed Corpse Bride. And people just don't seem interested in playing it. Maybe now they'll try it, but I guess you kind of need something in Rainbow DK to spend the corpses for C&E. I don't know if this is it. Maybe getting a taunt out of it is better, but...
I mean, taunt makes a big... I would think would make a big difference, but I don't know if that's enough to get Rainbow.
It's still 5 mana, right? If you don't have the 10 corpses, it's going to be... I mean, maybe you always have the 10 corpses in the deck. I don't know. I'm not a Rainbow enjoyer, so I don't really know how that comes together. Maybe that's good enough, but yeah, I haven't seen a single one of these since the buffs.
Yeah, we'll have to see if Eloise has anything by next week, because if anyone's going to.
No, she's doing sludge stuff now. Like, she's not even doing Rainbow stuff anymore. She's all in on sludge now, apparently.
Yes, if even Edel is ignoring the Rainbow DK.
Yeah. I mean, she's been so all in on sludge that she made herself sick before the show. So, you know.
Sludge is toxic. Have to be careful. It's an OSHA violation. All right. We also had a couple of changes to Warrior. Khazgaroth, the Titan, went from a 4/4 to a 4/5. Slagma, the Slumbering, which I have never played despite getting that really cool BlizzCon signature. This went from dormant for 8 turns, excavate to awaken 2 turns sooner. Now it is dormant for 6 turns, excavate to awaken 2 turns sooner. This is the 4 mana legendary 16/16 dormant, excavate to awaken, and has Russian taunt. I haven't seen. I have been seeing Odin Excavate Warrior. It seems
Yeah.
like that is doing very well. I haven't actually seen them play Slagma the Slumbering, but I don't know if that's because they're not running it or if that's because I just haven't seen it.
I would imagine that the thing that is disincentivizing people from playing Slagmaw is Reno.
Mhm.
Because, like, if you're leaving a dormant minion on the board for that long, it's just leaving it open to getting Reno'd. And then you've invested... I mean, you haven't invested a ton, but you've invested that card, and it's just sitting there, and then it doesn't do anything. You can get away with a low-tempo play in something like an Odin Warrior, but you can't get away with a low-tempo play that and then gets nullified before you get the value out of it. So having it be dormant for a little bit less is better. It's still kind of awkward because you have to excavate after you play the Slagmaw, which means that you're holding things like Cobalt Miner, like the 3-cost spell that gives you armor, until after you've played the Slagmaw. If you're doing that, and then that's a lot of your early turns in like an Excavate Warrior, so then you're just like not doing anything if you want to get the value out of it, or you're doing the Excavates and then not getting the discount on the Slagmaw. So it's still a little weird. Making that a little bit less punishing is probably good. I've literally never seen this even played, let alone wake up, since the set launched. So I guess we'll see if we start seeing Slagmaws. Anything helps here. I wouldn't be surprised if they, if this doesn't work, I wouldn't be surprised if they like reverted it to 8, but then made it for every excavate you've done this game, right? Just to make it so that if you've excavated 4 times by the time you play it, just have it go out. I think that would make it a
3.
Yeah. I think they would probably revert it to 4 or maybe even to 8 turns or even
true.
more if they did that. But I think that, that might make it a little bit more palatable. It's the fact that you have to have it on board before you start excavating. It just makes the turn order very awkward. And then the fact that Reno could invalidate it before you even get the chance for it to attack anything it doesn't help.
That is a great point. And I think Warrior's doing fine.
Yeah, it doesn't need it.
It doesn't need it, but I can understand why they made the buff. And I have seen some Khazgaroths.
Yeah.
Makes it just a little harder to remove. I don't think it makes it.
I guess
it's still one of the weaker Titans, I would say.
It's probably the weakest Titan. It's if it's not the weakest Titan, it's got to be like top 2. Maybe Argus is up there because Argus just does. Argus is not bad. It just doesn't.
Shell.
It just doesn't fit anywhere, right? Like that's.
Yeah.
But like I'm trying to think of like a weaker Titan than that, and I can't think of one. Like the Hunter one is very good. Like that was one that we thought was going to be weak, but that's very good. I mean, Norganon is turning out to not be as good, but I think again it just doesn't have a great home right now.
Maybe the Mech one. It's not even consistently run in Mech Rogue. Mech Rogue, by the way, it's good right now if you like Mech Rogue.
I thought it is in all the Mech Rogues, but maybe not. I thought it was in.
It's been in and out of lists. I'm not sure if it's in the list now.
Maybe just it's too slow. I don't know. But it's been in every Mech Rogue that I've seen. But yeah, it could be there. But yeah, Khazgaroth, I mean, it's like it should fit into Odin Warrior, and it doesn't, unless they're running the Renathal version or Reno. So like but in the 2 ofs version, it just doesn't fit there, and it feels like it ought to. So I don't know if the 1 health is going to help, but maybe if it helps it stick sometimes. Like if you go with the armor first, then it's a 4/10. Maybe that's a little bit. I don't know if that makes a functional difference over a 4/9, but we've talked a lot about the difference between 4 and 5 health in general throughout the course of these buffs. So maybe that is just good enough. We'll see.
it is, it is still a Titan that you have to remove if you see it, so that you do have to
Yes,
deal with
yes.
that extra 1 health. And that is stuff you're going to have to trade in because when it's attacking, it's immune. So I can see that making some difference there. And they definitely don't want to give big buffs to Warrior right now.
No, no.
Their last small buff, they took Horseshoe Slinger, which was a mech battle cry, deal 2 damage to a random enemy minion, quick draw, and one of its neighbors. It went from a 3 mana 2/2 to a 2 mana 1/1. As they say, they say this change should improve not just this card directly, but also any cards that generate quick draw cards. I think that's them really admitting we don't expect you to run this in your deck.
Yeah.
But we do hope you run like Flint Firearm in your deck.
Yeah.
And quick draw generation in general, when I've seen it recently, has seemed really strong.
Yeah, I mean, the change to Flint helped a lot. I could see maybe you having an argument for running this in a Mech Rogue, maybe, if you wanted some removal. Because it's
Helps you
cheaper,
gain
and
back
that
the
really...
board.
Yeah, and Mech Rogue really cares about the cost of the minions. So, because it wants to magnetize stuff onto it and whatnot. So, I could see that maybe being there, but yeah, like, I forgot this was a card. Like, I don't think I'd ever seen this played, so, I it's not gonna hurt anything. Yeah, I think that should be fine. I mean, yeah, if you get it at a Flint Firearm or like Stick Up, I think Stick Up is a class. It looks for class cards. But you could get it from like Amalgam of the Deep, right? Like that's also a way that you could get it, and then it would be a little bit more reasonable at 2 mana.
Yeah, there's a couple things that generate quick draw cards, I think, and just this makes those better. So
yeah, I mean, especially with Flint,
yeah,
just because
mainly,
yeah, just because you care a lot about the cost of stuff that's coming out of Flint, because you want to be getting multiple cards out of it on the turn that you play it.
Right. Yeah. So kind of like Fellerin really depended on the average cost of an Outcast card.
Yeah.
Flint depends on the average cost of a quick draw card. Perhaps even more so because you get them one at a time, unlike Fellerin. All right. Well, that, they also had a ton of Battlegrounds changes that we are not going to go into. Of course, if you play Battlegrounds, it's worth reading. This is their first major adjustment after the introduction of spells. They say they're overall very pleased with the initial reception of spells and that the meta is in a relatively healthy place, but they're making a wide range of lighter adjustments to tone down some overperformance, notably spell generators. So lots of changes there and some bug fixes, mostly to Battlegrounds. So if you haven't taken a look at the patch notes yet, go ahead and take a look. But overall, I think that will do it for us today.
Yeah.
I was thinking, there's only 2 of us. Maybe we'll have a shorter episode.
No. Like that just means we're just gonna talk longer. That's all that's gonna happen. But
All right. Well, we have many folks we'd like to thank. Check out our thanks section of the website at coinconcede.com, where you can also find our contact info, our show notes, and our Patreon information. You can monetarily support our show at patreon.com/coinconcede. Join us every week live by following us on Twitch at twitch.coinconcede.com. Join our community chats in our Discord at discord.coinconcede.com and write into our email at coinconcede@gmail.com. Follow us on Twitter at coinconcede, as well as like, share, and follow us on Facebook at facebook.com/coinconcede. If you would like some CC swag, head on over to our shop at shop.coinconcede.com. Big thanks to our producers, Number Theory, Kresh, Beef Squatch, David P., Walu, Jeremy T., Bottle Caps, Grumpy Monk, The Burger Club, Kirk Regan, Forgiven One, Crisley Bear, and The Grand Arcanum. Coin concedes.
So I'm first of all going to coin concede to basically everyone who has tried to set up coaching with me this month, because my calendar has been a mess. Both because of like Christmas, New Year's, and also because of like I have to work on weekends during New Year's, because that's also like when our year rolls and we have to do a bunch of stuff. So I forgot about all of that when I set up my coaching schedule. And so I've had to reschedule like multiple times with everybody. And everybody's been really, kind and understanding that I had a major ADHD moment and did not even think about my calendar when I sent that out. So So thank you to everybody for being understanding, and also coin concede to everybody who is sick, and hopefully will get better soon. Of course, Edelweiss, we miss you, and we are looking forward to talking to you next week when you're back and healthy. But also, Cora and Just a Guy both came down with COVID this week. And also Dano from Squelch just recorded an episode of Squelch where he had COVID, which is pretty much what you would expect if I explain that to you, because Squelch is already a little bit off the rails, and doing that with COVID brain. I will say, Paxlovid, if you're taking Paxlovid, cinnamon candies are very good for getting the taste of, as Dano put it, hot pennies out of your mouth. It does a very good job at killing that. But so that's just a pro tip for you from my my bout with COVID a couple months ago. But it's never fun, and hopefully everybody gets better quickly, and is it's never a fun way to spend the holidays, but hopefully they'll just get over that quickly and then back on their feet in no time.
All right, well, I would like to coin concede first to one of our listeners and Discord members, Torby Flenderson, who wrote today in the Discord that he had only reached Legend a couple times, like in 2020 and 2021, and then started listening to Coin Concede, joined the Discord at the beginning of this year, and has now hit Legend every single month this year, now that he's hit Legend in December. So that, I mean, when we see stuff like that, that's just really one of the more rewarding things to see, and certainly something that I can relate to, as that was similar to my journey as well. Also, a coin concede to everyone involved in Worlds, the casters, the competitors, even just, you know, people running the stream. Thanks for actually getting a notification in the client this time. Amazing. Moderators of the chat, which I kept minimized at all times because it's a giant chat in Twitch, but so thank you to those people who can't do that and are moderating it. Just, it was a really great event, and I really hope that we can have more in the future. But everyone worked really hard and did an amazing job.
Yeah, it was a great event. It made me excited knowing that we're very likely to have esports again next year. It took them a while to get everything together, but it seems like they're finally starting to get their feet out from under them again. ABAR leaving at the beginning of the year, and justifiably so. Is probably a big blow also, but them being, you know, it seems like they're finally starting to get their feet under them, and I'm hoping with a slightly more humane system. I don't want to say better, but more humane system, that hopefully there will be it'll provide some good esports moments for us to talk about, because, you know, again, this podcast has the tagline making competitive Hearthstone more accessible to you, and if there is not competitive Hearthstone, then we need to think of a new tagline, and nobody wants to do that. So
this tagline predates any of us.
Yes. I am not looking forward to having that conversation. I do not want to be doing that, so I would rather, like, there be esports if for no other reason. But that's going to do it for this week. So until next time, keep calm, and may all your sledges go face. And if you see us on ladder, coin concede.
Coin concede.